Hey, finally I have a new tutorial for you. I hope you enjoy it. I'm doing a little ring design for you today. Sorry, I've been a little bit late on getting out this tutorial. As many of you know who follow my channel, you maybe saw that I've been a little traveling artist these last couple months, and I rented out a little vintage gas station area and set up shop here. And I've been working really hard on a lot of projects and some farmers markets, and it's been a busy couple months, and I'm very excited to get back to tutorials, so enjoy. As you might notice, I have a new setup area. Hope that everything looks fine. I've got some nice natural light coming in from the window next to me, so I shouldn't have any shadows or anything casting on our project. This is the ring we are making today. I've chosen to use copper wire in this. The first time I made this was for a custom order, and I used a rose quartz, so it was a nice pink 8mm bead, and then I used silver, and it really turned out beautiful. I went back through the design today just to take mental notes before I made the tutorial, and of course I just used copper for it. So you will need whatever wire you want, silver, copper, colored, but we are using 20 gauge copper wire and 28 gauge copper wire. Oh, there goes my rings, mandrels. I buy my wire from Rio Grande. You will also need a bead. In this case, I am using an 8mm bead. This is a black onyx. Also, you will need a ring mandrel. I have two. This is the first one I got. It's just a really cheap plastic one, and then I did finally invest in a nice heavy ring mandrel. For today's project, I will actually be working with the cheaper one, and one of the reasons is it has this nice groove on the back side, and that makes, if you're wrapping a bead of any sort, it makes it really nice. You'll see as we go along to kind of set the bead in the groove and then take the wires around. You know, I used this for years, and actually before I had this, I used a pool stick. So don't worry about having fancy tools. The main reason I use this one is if I'm doing metal smithing and I need to hammer like, you know, a ring, it's much better for stuff like that. This, if I'm just doing little wire wrapped rings that are nice and easy, it's easier for me to work with. So I'll be using that one. Tools, all you'll need is a pair of cutting tools, maybe some chain nose or flat nose pliers. I've got two of those, I guess. That's all you'll need. Cutters and something to squeeze it. And I am cutting about 20 inches worth of the 20 gauge wire. And for this design, I just finished it up because I always like to go through the designs before I make the tutorials. I used about 2 feet of the 28 gauge wire, but I was like really almost running out at the end. So just to be safe this time around, I'm using about 3 feet of 28 gauge wire. You may need to adjust the amount of wire you use depending on the size of the ring you want and the size of the bead you're using. Today we're going to go for about a size 7 ring. So these measurements work well. So if you need a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, just estimate and add a little bit more wire on so you don't end up running out of anything. I really am excited to teach you this design because we're going to cover a couple concepts. One, I don't think I've ever done this type of weave in a tutorial yet. I don't think so. No. We are also going to cover the concept. A lot of people want to know like how to keep your weave. So you notice my 2 base wires here get further apart and then come together. So we want to be able to create a nice even looking weave. allowing those wires to go apart and then come together. So we're going to talk about some tension and shaping as we go along. And then the other concept too is we have a big curve going on in the weave, and there's a couple, or there's something, a little trick, concept, technique, whatever you want to call it, that you can do to ensure that your weave looks nice and even as you're going around a curve. So without further ado, let's go ahead, pick up your ring mandrel, and I'm going to flip the camera because I'll show you. Okay. If you've watched any of my ring tutorials before, you know I always have to flip the camera and do this kind of funky angle because I always hold my ring mandrel between my knees. It just makes life easier. All right, so I've got the bead on in the middle of the 20 gauge wire, and for a size 7, so I'm going to use this groove on the back side of my ring mandrel, and I'm going to place that bead at about like the 6.5. So sometimes depending on your rings, depending on the design, you might have to start larger if you're going to wrap the wire around the base a lot, because then it's going to shrink it up. So you always want to start larger because you know it's going to shrink. In this case, I've worked with this design a lot, and you're not going to get a whole lot of shrinkage on it, but what will happen is if you wrap your wire around, like let's say the one, as soon as you release the tension, it's going to expand a little bit. So you always have a little expansion. I like to start up a little bit higher on this ring design. So we're going to start at the 6.5, so that when it does expand, it's closer to the 7, and at the end we can stretch it a little bit more and work harden it to get it at our perfect size. So I'm at that 6.5. Go ahead and take the wires and crisscross them around. Oh, and you'll see here, okay, sometimes this happens, and I think it's because it's awkward camera angle right now. I kind of got this going on. So what you can do if you want before you even wrap it, I'm going to undo these, is I'll just go to either side and kind of push the wire straight down so that it's more even. You don't have one side that's up higher than the other. So now we got it evened out. Okay. All right, I'll go back to that 6.5 mark, crisscross, and pull tight. Now let me change the camera angle. This should be better. Okay, so I'm at the 6.5. Go ahead and wrap it around. I'm gonna flip the ring mandrel around. I've got that bead, it's not going anywhere in that groove. Crisscross it. Pull tight, and then start to spiral or twist the wire around the bead. And we'll go around so that one is up at the very top. This one I'm going to bring around the same. Now, if you wanted to do just a wrap around, you could continue wrapping around and then attach these to the sides, and this is what you would get. Voila. So I've just continued to spiral and spiral around, and then I take these and I attach them to the base. Maybe I'll just do another tutorial on that. So we're kind of working around this concept, but we're making it a little bit more elaborate. Before we go on, just to break down the weave that we're doing. So I'm going to start around the bottom wire. So place the tail of the wire on the back side of the wire. We're going to wrap around the bottom wire once. And then we're going to go up the front and fully around the top wire, down the back side, fully around the bottom wire, up the front side. Fully around the top wire, down the back side. Fully around the bottom wire, up the front side. All right, so this is the pattern. Let's get on with that weave now. So I'm going to go around the bottom wire, up the front, around the top wire, all the way around, go down the back side, around the bottom wire, up the front, around the top wire, down the back side. All right, so we've got this going. Okay, so we're attached, it's okay. You want the wires to be real close together, the weave to be tight here. So I'm gonna start to bend this bottom wire. The bottom wire is really just gonna continue going around the bead the whole time, and then this top wire is gonna be the outside wire that we'll need to shape further away from the other base wire. So we don't have to complete the full shape yet because we still want to be able to get the wires, or sorry, get the weave around the wires. So I'll just kind of start off like this, slowly increasing the space between the two wires. We want to continue with the same weaving pattern, but we do have to be careful because if you're trying to keep your two base wires spaced out, you can't pull very hard on the wire because that'll bring them together. So I'm going to go around the bottom wire, and maybe I'll undo this a little bit just so it's easier to get that wire. And I'm using my thumb over here to brace these wires so that they don't pull away, and pulling tight on that. And then when I go up the front and around the top, this is the one I have to be careful not to pull to bring the wires close together. So again, I'm bracing with my thumb over here, pushing in, and then kind of pulling tight so that I do have some tension around each of those coils, but I don't have tension pulling the wires together. Down the back side, around, sorry, off frame there, around the bottom, pull tight, go up the front, over the top wire, down the back side. All right, and you can see everything is a little spaced out here, so I want to condense it a bit. I'm going to go in, because with this design, it's kind of hard to use your fingers to push everything together. Maybe you'll be able to, but I've been using some pliers to kind of squish. Okay, so we've got to start on that wire, and all the weaves are practically touching each other. There's no spaces between them. So continuing on, now we're starting to get some space and some curvature going. I'm just going to continue on with my single loop around each of the wires for a little bit longer. All right, so now let's squish again. To keep this weave even now, we're going to talk about that curving concept. So right now I've been doing a single loop around each of the wires before I go up the front or down the back. To keep this even, because I don't have to travel as far on this inner wire as I do on the outer wire, I'm going to end up putting a couple extra wraps around the top wire before I take it down the back side. And you can kind of use your judgment here. Let's go ahead and just start by putting 1, 2, and it depends on how much curve. Maybe we'll change up the number of wraps around. Let's go ahead and do 3 full wraps around the top wire and then down the back side. That might have been maybe one too many. And then I will keep it the same here, just 1 loop around the bottom wire, go to the top, and we'll do 1, 2, I guess I'll go ahead and do another 3, and then down the back side. So this is going to keep your wires. See over here, I probably should have started a little bit sooner because the wires are already angled because they cannot keep up with the curve. So now by putting a few more coils in on the top instead of the bottom, you won't have that funky curve and the wires will go straight across to the other wire. Hope that makes sense. Let's go around the top wire. 1, 2. This whole time I'm really bracing, I'm holding these wires in place, and the only tension I'm creating is around that single wire. And then when I go down the back side, I try to make sure that that is as straight as possible without pulling too hard to bring that wire down. Go around the bottom wire. 1. Oh yeah, we're just doing 1. And then you'll want to continue shaping the wire as you go around. So I'm going to curve this bottom wire around. And then you could really make this kind of any shape you want. We're just going to curve it today. I want the furthest, oh wait, let's see, where am I? Oh, I'm not there yet. This is my top. Because I would kind of like this more crescent shape, so I'd like the widest part of the weave to be right below the bead. So we'll just kind of shape this around. Maybe I'll make this one really big. Push that in. And then I'll go ahead and continue a few more rounds. Once in a while, just go in and make sure everything is kind of squeezed. This is a hard weave to kind of compress. So you just have to find little ways of pushing it in. And like I said, use your judgment as you go around the curve, how many coils around the outside curve, the outside wire of the curve you need. Kind of been sticking with 3, which seems to be working fine. Push that in. Oops, I did 2 on the bottom. That's okay. just periodically checking your shape. Make sure it's on the path that you want. Now we're getting to like the widest portion of the two wires. And my weave is lining up pretty good. If I push that bottom one in a little bit more. Oops, I think I was supposed to go. No, I did 1, 2, 3 over the top. That wire looks a little kinky, so I'm just gonna go in and squeeze it, try to flatten it out. It's on the back side, so it'll be okay. We're now about halfway around, and I have to admit I kind of blew past the apex here, and I had to end up uncoiling some of my weave because as soon as you get to the center at the bottom, the largest width here, as we curve it around, we've got to start to get these wires to come closer together. So when I shape, I just kind of use my thumb to create this curve, so nothing happens too dramatically. Start to get that on track to coming back around. And closing the gap up between the two wires. And then continue on with your weave. I'm still going to use extra coils around the outside of the coil, but I will start once the curve kind of diminishes. I won't use as many coils around this outside wire. Can get kind of tricky here. I'm being very careful not to pull on the wires and ruin the shape I have going on. Using my other thumb all the time to kind of brace the piece so that I can use my right hand to create the tension I need in the wire so that the weave looks nice and clean. Kind of turn it around and check it because you can still shape. And I want these to be pretty much touching once they come up to the top, but I don't want it to lose that crescent shape. So I got to keep that outside wire rounded. Looking okay. And if at any time this tail from the beginning where we started the weave gets in your way, go in and trim it off. Like so. All right, so now I can start to go back to the unmodified version of the weave because I don't really have much curvature left between the two wires, so I can go back to just one coil around the bottom and one coil around the top. And then I'm even going to squeeze these together even more. As it gets to the very top, so you can see what we're going for. Here we want a little bit of an overlap, but we basically want to end the same way we started. Maybe just a little bit further. Okay, that should be enough. Go ahead and trim off this tail. And then we're going to take whatever's remaining of the weave and the two plain wires, and we're going to bring it around the back side, start to curve it around. We'll leave whatever wires on the outside. We're going to curve that around these two wires and then bring the inside wire around the bead like so. All right, and then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap each of these wires around the band. Now when you're doing this, make sure these wires don't get crisscrossed. When you come around, a little trick to tighten this up is to grab a hold of the wire and kind of curve and pull it around and kind of work it back and forth. And that will tighten it up. And if your band wires get a little crisscross, just kind of go in there and twist them so that they're where they need to be. Ooh, and then this kind of popped out on me, so we're gonna tuck him in. Just kind of squeeze that in more. There we go. He's more hidden now on the back side again. That would have popped out if I probably got this coil a little too far this way on the band. I want to keep it towards the bead. That'll keep those other wires hidden on the back side. Now you could go around once. I'm going to go around 2 times. And then bring it around to the front where I trim it. I like to trim it on the front side because I don't want anything scratching me. I cut it on the inside of the band and then go in. I like to grab a hold of it and squeeze and rotate, kind of pulling that cut edge down and around so it's out of the way and not scratching. And then we will do the same thing on the other side, and you'll notice that as soon as you tie these to the band, it's going to make it look, the band look really even and nice. And there you have your ring. All right, my band is still a little funky looking, so what we'll do is take our ring mandrel, slide that on. A lot of times what you can do is just push, use your fingers and just push the band down, and that's going to stretch and harden the band and give it a nice shape and line up the 2 bands so that they're side by side and there's no gaps between them. And then carefully kind of take it off, flip it over, and do the exact same thing on the other side. Because the ring mandrel tapers, if you don't do it on both sides, you'll have one band that is larger than the other. Another thing you can do if you ever need to really stretch it a little bit more, I take a hammer. If you have a rawhide hammer, that would be great. I don't have one, so I just cover mine with a little cloth so I don't mar the metal, and you can just kind of hit the band and nudge it down. That will really work harden it. Just give it a little hit. Okay. Oh. See what that did? I got a little space, but that's fine. I'm okay with that. And let's see. This I know is a true size 7. Let's see size-wise how it is. Ugh. Not bad. It's a little bit tight because of the bead on there, of course. So I would probably just put it back on the ring mandrel. Let's see where it falls. So even though it's right around that 7, because of that bead in there, it's going to push into your finger a little bit. So I'm going to try to stretch it down. I'm going to give it a few little hits with the hammer, and we'll see how that feels. There, that's better. It's stretched pretty nicely. Had a good amount of movement that I could play with it at the end. So another reason I do like to start a little bit smaller, because I know that I am going to put it on the ring mandrel at the end and try to push it down to expand this, give the ring a nice shape, and work harden it. So there we have it. If you would like to learn how to patina your pieces, I do have a tutorial on that. I will put it in the description box below. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give me a thumbs up on the video and subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications so you're notified every time that I put out a new tutorial. Thanks so much for joining, everyone, and I'll be back soon. Thank you.